Hey, welcome to Quick Take. I'm Susie, and this is James. How are you, James?
I'm fantastic. I'm very happy to be here.
That's so nice. Thank
Did
you
that
for
sound contrived?
shifting that mindset for me. I appreciate you showing up.
I'm here. I'm here.
We're going to talk about something that neither of us are. Are you an introvert?
No.
Okay.
Are you?
I've been tested on, there's a test you can take, and they put us all in a room and they had us go to what percentage you
Yeah.
were. And I was all the way to the right. Compared to everybody else in the room, I was
Which
way over indexed on being an extrovert.
extrovert? Oh,
Mhm.
extrovert.
Yeah, shocker. Shocker?
Introverts behave in a certain way. I think there is a misconception that introverts are shy and quiet.
Oh, for sure.
But I think that the way I think about it is I go into a room with people and I get energy from those people.
Yeah.
And I think introverts go into a room full of people and it's exhausting. They may behave the exact same way. They may talk and speak and do the exact same thing. But my shortcut way of thinking about it is that. I'm sure some of our listeners will correct me.
I think the other thing is that introverts think to talk and extroverts talk to
Talk
think.
to think.
And I wish I could think to talk. I really do. Sometimes I say things, I'm like, oh,
I don't know that I
why?
agree with that.
Oh, it's totally how, for me,
I do know there are people who absolutely talk to things. They're thinking out loud, and I can do that. But I do think that there are people who are extroverts who are capable of thinking before they speak. So I don't know that that's a hard and fast. But I guess every rule in this space is not hard and fast. And I think that the topic we were going to talk about, actually, which is probably really interesting in this aspect, is like the concept of a more effective CEO or the effectiveness of an introverted CEO, more C-level leader. And I've been reading a couple interesting articles about how there are certainly examples of where an introverted C-suite leader brings incredible value and is more effective.
yeah. And I will say from just my experience, since the way I look at extrovert and introvert may be counter to how you look at it, is that when people are introverts and they're leaders, they tend to be more thoughtful about their approach. They give space to others, so they make people feel heard, understood. A lot of times surround themselves with people that counterbalance the way that they might be showing up. But what's interesting to me is I've told this to leaders that are more introverted than me. I see that as confidence. In fact, a good friend of mine, Sharice, that you know, she's an engineer, a CEO. We've had this dialogue because she's introverted and I'm extroverted. And she said, when I told her that I see that as confidence when you don't fill every space in a conversation, she was blown away because she was looking at it as a doubt that people
Right.
were like, she doesn't know.
Sure.
And even as an accomplished engineer, CEO, even that how you're showing up or the perspective of you as an
Sure.
introvert is interesting when you think about how that applies to the experience of being around you.
Certainly Shari's grown up in the cable industry, a classic, white male environment. A lot of it was leadership through proclamation, leadership through speaking about the top, less listening and more speaking out loud. And that proclamation, giving directives, doesn't often lead to better buy-in or more innovations. And so I think that the alternative to that would be, leading through questions, the listening model, if you will. And I think that's what you're describing is introverts may take a different approach than feeling like they need to give a speech every day.
Yeah. And it's interesting about listening is that we are taught to present, we're taught to speak, we're taught to write, but we're not really taught to listen.
Sure.
And there's so much power in that because you can unlock things for others. And so that ability to make that space for somebody else is so powerful. And that just is a natural cadence for somebody that's allowing that to happen who's more introverted.
I don't know that extroverted leaders are the ones that we see a lot of, but we do see, and we are trained to see the outgoing, the energetic, the well-spoken, the motivational leader. And I think the natural assumption is that person is an extrovert. Now, therefore, I think we have a bias to assume that, good CEOs are extroverts. But I do think that in many cases, maybe it is a confirmation bias or scarcity bias that you don't see an extrovert on stage. Or let me say it differently. If you have an introvert who's a leader, but you only see this person when they're on stage, you have to assume they're like this all the time.
Yeah.
Right? The only time you see your leader is in a town hall or on stage or on Squawk Box. Well, then they must do that all the time. And every time they walk into a room, they're extroverts. But, we don't get that perspective, and we don't realize that they spent 10 minutes afterwards, doing yoga to get their shit back together. We've manufactured that false assumption.
Yeah. The other aspect of how you portray, like we believe nonverbals more than what people say. That's what the research says. And people that talk with their hands, when you have open hands, that relays confidence and connection.
Yep.
And that's real. That's real. So you don't want to make something that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
But you have to be aware of that. And that charisma, that being in the room, that is also creating this trust. So you have to think about, if you don't have that, that doesn't come naturally, how do you make people feel? Because that's what leadership is about, is how do you make people feel? And so sometimes those things portray, the nonverbals are so important as well. And those might not come naturally to people.
Yeah, but I would argue that me going into a room and asking everybody how they are, or telling everybody how excited I am, and telling people how amazing this project is going to be, and telling them the importance of it, gets an outcome that could be equivalent to or less effective as asking people how excited they are, asking how important they think this is, and asking what a game changer it is. And simply by being more interested in what people have to say and hearing that as an introvert may, elicit more engagement, may elicit more involvement, may elicit more buy-in. So, just because somebody isn't comfortable or doesn't want to get in front of the room and opine doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing the same kind of charismatic type of work.
Oh, absolutely. I think that is what inspires people to feel a part of it. People are more likely to be all bought in if they feel like their voice has been heard. I'm just saying too, is just pay attention to how you make that connection. I'm not trying to say you walk into a room, you say nothing, and your nonverbals are going to speak for you. That is not. It's just like, be aware of what tendencies your natural personality brings in or doesn't with people, and how do you balance that out for whatever that room needs. I, not that many years ago, was one-on-one with a senior executive who was speaking to me, telling me about this new role that they wanted me to quote. And I was like, and my nonverbals, I was like really engaged. And I always thought my nonverbals were really positive. And he finally got really frustrated with me. And he stopped talking and goes, "What is all this? What is this? This and what does this all mean? Are you agreeing with me?" And I thought, wow, I am showing up in a way that is really disruptive to him.
Well, it wasn't working for him in his style. That's really interesting.
And so understanding what that feels like to the other person in front of you is my whole point.
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge element of this. But I think for me, the topic is interesting because I would have assumed that the charismatic, the extroverted CEO would be the norm, or even maybe the more successful one. But thinking it through, there's certainly benefits of the opposite. I think there's some research that I was reading in prep for this that says, as many as 70% of CEOs are introverts. That goes against my gut feel, but seems more logical and actually beneficial as we talk through it.
Yeah, I think the way I interpret that article for me is those CEOs could be successful in getting money and presenting what the product does and getting people excited about it. And maybe that the inspiration to the team and the motivation to the team and all of that is really what we're missing in terms of that power that it has.
How I would spin that a little differently is that they do what they do. And then if that extroverted element is necessary, they just have someone else that does
Exactly.
that. I think we talked about that on a couple other episodes where good leaders surround themselves with other people who are different than them to
Yeah.
fulfill the needs of the organization. And I'm going to elicit engagement with some of my people by being more thoughtful and listening. And then other parts of the organization need a rallying cry and a leader with the, pulling the sword and diving into battle. Surround yourself, get a team that can do both. To expect one leader to do that certainly doesn't make sense. We're not seeing that in larger companies or Fortune 1,000 companies. One guy is not, or one gal is not the sole source of the following.
Yeah. It's not about being a well-balanced leader that can do everything.
Mm,
It's about being a well-balanced team
yep,
that you bring in the resources that make you a whole.
that's fantastic. That's a great place to finish. I think that's the smartest thing a leader can do is realize they shouldn't try to be everything.